The night holds secrets, desires you should never have, and temptations you may not survive. Welcome to Midnight Temptations.
For 20 years, I believed I knew exactly who I was. I was a predator, a man who understood loneliness better than anyone. I knew how to recognize it in a woman's eyes. I knew how to make her feel beautiful, how to make her feel safe, how to make her believe for one night that she had finally found someone who understood her. Then I would bring her home, and I would take her soul. 37 women had entered my house. 37 souls had disappeared into me. And until I met Naomi, I had never once regretted it. My name is Adrian Cross. At least that's the name I use now. I discovered what I could do when I was 28. The first time it happened, I didn't understand it. A woman was lying in my arms. Her heartbeat had grown quiet. Then I saw something leaving her body. A golden light. It drifted from her chest like smoke caught in sunlight. Before I could stop it, the light entered me. And suddenly, I remembered everything about her. Her childhood, her mother's voice, her first kiss, the happiest day of her life, her deepest fear. Every memory flooded through me. Then they disappeared, and something inside me awakened, a hunger that never truly went away. After that, I learned how to control it. Or at least I thought I had. I never chased anyone. I never forced anyone. I simply became the man they wanted to meet. I listened. I remembered little things. I made them laugh. I gave them attention when the rest of the world made them feel invisible. And eventually, they trusted me enough to come home. My house was perfect for it. An old mansion hidden behind iron gates, surrounded by trees. Inside were fireplaces, antique furniture, expensive wine, and enough darkness to hide almost anything. There was only one room my guests never entered. The basement. That was where the hunger lived. For years, everything worked exactly as I wanted. Until Naomi walked into my life. She was standing alone at a small wine bar one rainy evening. I noticed her immediately. She was beautiful. A black woman with deep brown skin, long natural curls, and the kind of eyes that seemed to look straight through people. She wasn't trying to attract attention. She didn't need to. There was something about her. Something powerful. I watched her for several minutes before approaching. Normally, I knew exactly what to say. With Naomi, I forgot every line I had ever learned. She looked at me. "You've been staring at me." I smiled. "I'm sorry." "No, you're not." I laughed. She laughed too. And something strange happened. The hunger disappeared. Completely. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't thinking about someone's soul. I was thinking about her. We talked for hours. She told me about her life, her family, her dreams, the things she wanted to accomplish, the places she wanted to visit. I asked her what she was looking for. She stared into her glass. Something real. Those two words followed me all the way home. That night, I invited her to my house. She accepted. I watched her walk through my front door and realized I had made a terrible mistake. Because I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. I knew how this story normally ended. But when Naomi looked at me, I couldn't do it. Instead, I made her dinner. We sat beside the fireplace and talked until sunrise. When she finally fell asleep against my chest, I stared at the ceiling. I was confused. I didn't want her soul. I wanted her. And I had no idea what to do with that feeling. Naomi came back the next night. Then the night after that. Soon we were inseparable. She brought laughter back into my house, music, warmth, life. We cooked together, danced in the living room, stayed awake until morning talking about everything and nothing. And eventually, we fell deeply in love. Our nights together became something I had never experienced. There was passion. There was tenderness. There were long embraces, whispered promises, and moments when the rest of the world seemed to disappear. For the first time in my life, I wasn't taking something from someone. I was giving myself to someone. And that frightened me more than anything I had ever known. Then one night I felt it. The hunger. I was lying beside Naomi while she slept. Moonlight spilled across the bed. I looked at her, and beneath her skin I saw it. A golden glow, her soul. It was brighter than any soul I had ever seen. I reached toward her. My fingers stopped inches from her chest. One touch. That's all it would take. I could feel the hunger pulling me toward her. I could almost taste the power inside her. Then I pulled my hand away. No. I got out of bed. I walked downstairs. I locked myself inside the basement. And for the first time in 20 years, I was terrified of myself. The next morning, Naomi found me sitting on the kitchen floor. She knelt beside me. What happened? I couldn't look at her. You need to leave. She stared at me. Why? Because I'm not who you think I am. Then tell me who you are. I looked into her eyes, and I told her everything. The women, the house, the souls, the hunger, all of it. When I finished, Naomi was crying. I expected her to run. Instead, she asked quietly, how many? 37. She closed her eyes. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she asked, and what do you want from me? I answered honestly, nothing. She looked confused. I want you alive. She reached up and touched my face. You're afraid of loving me. Yes, why? Because I don't know how to love something without destroying it. Her eyes filled with tears. Then learned. That night the hunger returned, stronger. Much stronger. Naomi was standing in front of me when the room suddenly became cold. Every candle went out. The darkness seemed to move around us. Then the golden light appeared beneath her skin, her soul. Beautiful, bright, tempting. I felt myself changing. The monster inside me was waking. I stepped toward her. Naomi didn't move. Adrian. I stopped. Look at me. I couldn't. Adrian, look at me. I raised my eyes. She was crying, but she wasn't afraid. You don't have to become what you were. The hunger screamed inside me. I could feel her soul calling to me. Take mine, she whispered. I shook my head, never. Then fight. I fell to my knees. The darkness inside me exploded outward. The walls shook. The windows rattled. And suddenly, the room filled with golden lights. 37 of them. 37 souls. 37 women. They appeared around me. I expected them to hate me. I expected them to come for me. Instead, they simply looked at me. Then they looked at Naomi. And somehow I understood. They weren't there to punish me. They were there to remind me. Every soul I had taken had been a person. A daughter, a sister, a friend. Someone who had once been loved. Someone who had trusted me. The golden lights began rising toward the ceiling. One after another. They disappeared. And when the last one vanished, the hunger inside me went silent. Completely silent. I collapsed onto the floor. Naomi wrapped her arms around me. I held onto her as though she were the only solid thing left in the world. I don't deserve you, I whispered. No, she said. You don't. I looked at her. She smiled through her tears. But maybe you deserve the chance to become someone who does. That was the night the soul collector disappeared. Not because someone destroyed me. Because someone finally gave me a reason to stop. The next morning, I went into the basement. I looked at everything I had kept down there. Photographs, journals, memories. Evidence of the life I had hidden from the world. I burned it all. Then I walked out of that house with Naomi. I never went back. People still wonder what happened to the women who disappeared. Some answers will never be found, and I will carry those answers for the rest of my life. But every night, when Naomi falls asleep beside me, I watch her. Sometimes I still see that golden light beneath her skin. Sometimes the old hunger whispers, "Take her. Claim her. Make her yours forever." But then Naomi reaches for my hand in her sleep. And I remember. She didn't save me because she was stronger than the monster. She saved me because she showed me something the monster could never understand. Love. Real love. The kind that doesn't possess. The kind that doesn't consume. The kind that asks you to become better instead of giving you permission to remain broken. I've spent 20 years taking souls. Now I understand what a soul is worth. And Naomi's is the one thing in this world I would rather lose everything than take. Because sometimes the greatest temptation isn't the thing you desperately want. It's the thing you finally realize. You must let live.
The night is over, but temptation never sleeps. Until next time, my loves, good night.
I am the midnight listener. I hear what the living hide, and the dead cannot forget.
My name doesn't matter. That's what I keep telling myself. Names belong to people who still have a future. I don't think I have one anymore. If you're listening to this, it means I finally found the courage to tell someone the truth. Not the version I told the police. Not the version I told my neighbors. Not even the version I told myself when I looked in the mirror every morning and pretended I was still the same woman I was 20 years ago. This is the truth. I poisoned my husband, and somehow that wasn't the worst thing that happened. My husband, Daniel, and I were married for 27 years. People used to tell us we were lucky. You're still together after all this time. They said it like marriage was some kind of trophy, like surviving something meant you won. But nobody knew what happened behind closed doors. Nobody saw how a person could disappear while still being alive. Daniel wasn't the kind of man strangers would hate. That's what made it harder. He was charming, funny, the kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone love him. But at home, I became invisible. My opinions became arguments. My feelings became inconveniences. My dreams became things I should have grown out of. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being his wife. I became the person who cooked his meals, cleaned his house, remembered his appointments, and smiled when people asked how we were doing. Couldn't be better, I'd say. Those words became my prison. Then came 50. Nobody prepares you for what happens when your body starts changing without asking permission. The nights became unbearable. I would wake up covered in sweat, staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside me like nothing in the world was wrong. My emotions felt like a storm I couldn't control. Some days I cried for no reason. Some days I felt nothing at all. And when I tried to explain it, Daniel would laugh. "You're just being dramatic." That sentence stayed with me, because after years of hearing it, you start believing it. Maybe I was dramatic. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was the problem. Until one day, I looked in the mirror and realized I didn't recognize the woman staring back. I wasn't old. I wasn't broken. I was just tired. Tired of begging someone to notice I existed. The night everything changed started like any other night. Another argument, another reminder that I was somehow always the problem. Daniel said things that I can't repeat, not because they were the worst things anyone has ever said, but because they were the things he knew would hurt me, the things only someone who loved you could know. After he went to sleep, I sat alone in the kitchen. The house was silent, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid. I felt empty. That's the part nobody understands. They think anger is loud. They think rage looks like screaming and breaking things. Sometimes rage is quiet. Sometimes it sits at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and realizes something inside you has gone cold. The next morning changed everything, and I have spent every day since wondering if that moment was really my decision, or if something else had already decided for me. After Daniel was gone, everyone expected me to fall apart. They expected grief. They expected tears. And I did cry, but not the way people expected. I cried because I remembered who I used to be. I cried because I realized how much of my life I had spent waiting for a different version of him to appear. A kinder version, a loving version, the man I kept hoping would come back. But he never did. I thought I was finally free. I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong. The first sign happened 3 nights later. I woke up at exactly 2:17 in the morning. I don't know why that time matters. It just does, because ever since then, I've never been able to sleep past it. I heard a sound coming from downstairs, a familiar sound, a sound I had heard thousands of times. Daniel clearing his throat. I sat up in bed. My first thought was impossible. My second thought was fear. I walked downstairs slowly. The house was dark. The kitchen was empty. But sitting on the counter was Daniel's coffee cup, the same one he used every morning, the same one I had packed away. I knew I had packed it away because I remember holding it. I remember thinking how strange it was that an object could carry so many memories. I picked it up. It was warm. After that, it happened every night. A door left open. A chair moved. The sound of footsteps walking across the hallway. Sometimes I smelled his cologne. Sometimes I heard his voice. Never clearly, never enough to prove anything, just enough to make me question my own mind. My daughter told me I needed help. She said grief can make people experience things. She said guilt can create shadows. Maybe she was right. But guilt doesn't turn on the television at 2:17 in the morning. Guilt doesn't whisper your name from an empty bedroom. And guilt doesn't leave fingerprints on a mirror. One night, I finally spoke. I stood in the bedroom doorway. My hands were shaking. I know you're here. The room went silent. Then, a voice answered. Of course, I'm here. I couldn't breathe. Because it was his voice. Daniel's voice. Exactly the way I remembered it. But something about it felt wrong. Like hearing a song you've known your entire life, played with one note missing. Why are you doing this? I whispered. There was a pause. Then the voice said, because you never listened when I was alive. The next morning, I found something on my kitchen table. A photograph. A picture from our wedding day. I hadn't seen it in years. But there was something written on the back. 3 words. Words that made my entire body go cold. Remember the promise. At first, I thought it was a message from Daniel. Then I looked closer. The handwriting wasn't his. It was mine. I searched through old boxes, old journals, old photographs, and that's when I found something I had forgotten. Something my mind had buried. Years ago, during one of our worst fights, I had written a letter. Not a letter to Daniel. A letter to myself. A confession of everything I had endured. Everything I had lost. Everything I wanted to escape. At the bottom, I wrote, one day, I will be free. But underneath that, someone had written, be careful what you wish for. I don't remember writing that. I don't remember seeing it. But I recognized the handwriting. It was mine. That night, Daniel appeared. Not as a shadow. Not as a sound. He was standing in the doorway. Exactly as he looked the last day I saw him. I expected anger. I expected revenge. Instead, he looked sad. I didn't come back because I wanted to hurt you. My voice trembled. Then why are you here? He looked around the room. At the house. At our life together. And he said, because you were never the only one trapped. That's when I remembered. The arguments, the cruelty, the loneliness. But I also remembered the moments I had forgotten. The times he apologized. The times he tried. The times I pushed him away. Because I had already decided who he was. Had he changed? Or had I stopped seeing him clearly? I don't know. Maybe that's the punishment. Maybe that's the horror. Not knowing. The next morning, I went to the place where Daniel was buried. I expected answers. Instead, I found something impossible. The ground was untouched. There was no sign anyone had ever been there. No evidence, no proof, nothing. I went home and searched through every record I had, every document, every photograph, every memory. And that's when I found the truth. Daniel had been gone for 6 months. Not weeks, not days. 6 months. The man I remembered arguing with. The man I remembered sitting across from me. The man I remembered saying goodbye to was already gone. I don't know what happened during those 6 months. I don't know who I was living with. I don't know what came home every night. But I know one thing. It knew my secrets. It knew my regrets. It knew every word I never said. And now, every night at 2:17, it waits beside me. Sometimes it sounds like Daniel. Sometimes it sounds like me. And sometimes it sounds like something that has been waiting much longer than either of us. So if you're listening to this confession, if you hear someone you love calling your name after midnight, don't answer, because not everything that comes back is coming home. This was my confession, and now it's yours.
Welcome back to Half Past Horror. I am the Lantern Keeper. Within this lantern dwell the souls of those whose stories were never meant to be told. Tonight, I shall share one with you. But be warned, some stories refuse to stay buried.
My name was Sam Mercer. I suppose I should start by telling you that I'm dead. I know that's probably not the kind of introduction you were expecting, but I've had a long time to think about what happened to me. And if I'm being honest, death wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was realizing how much time I'd wasted while I was still alive. Especially with my brother. His name was Brad. Brad and I were only 18 months apart, but you would have thought we were raised in completely different families. I was the responsible one. Brad was the reckless one. I stayed in school. Brad dropped out. I bought a house. Brad moved from place to place. I got married. Brad never seemed to settle down. But when we were kids, none of that mattered. We were inseparable. We used to sneak out of the house after our parents went to sleep and sit on the roof of our garage, eating cereal straight from the box. Brad always said we'd still be doing it when we were 80. I believed him. Then our father died, and everything changed. Dad left us an old property outside town. It wasn't worth much. A rundown house, a barn, and several acres of land. I wanted to sell it. Brad wanted to keep it. He said Dad had promised him the property. I told him Dad had never said that. Brad called me a liar. I called him irresponsible. And then he said something that neither of us ever took back. He told me I had always thought I was better than him. I told him maybe I was. That was the last real conversation we ever had. 4 years passed. I wish I could tell you there was some dramatic reason we stayed apart. There wasn't. That's what makes it worse. Neither of us called. Neither of us apologized. We simply kept waiting for the other person to make the first move. Then one Thursday night, my phone rang. I was sitting at my kitchen table eating dinner. I looked at the screen, Brad. I hadn't seen his name in years. For a moment, I just stared at it. I remember thinking that maybe something had happened. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he needed money. Maybe he was finally ready to talk. Then I became angry. I told myself I wasn't going to let him walk back into my life whenever he felt like it. So I didn't answer. The calls stopped. A few seconds later, my phone rang again. Brad. I let it ring. Then came a text, call me. It's important. I picked up the phone. I actually started typing a response. Then I deleted it. I told myself I'd call him tomorrow. That was the last decision I made while Brad was alive. The next morning, the police knocked on my door. They told me Brad had died in a car accident. They believed it happened sometime around midnight. His truck had left the road on a stretch of highway outside town. There had been rain. The road was slick. They said it looked like he lost control. I remember the officer asking if Brad had any enemies. I almost laughed. Brad had plenty of people who didn't like him. But enemies? I didn't know. I hadn't spoken to him in 4 years. The funeral was 3 days later. I stood in the back. I couldn't bring myself to walk toward the casket. I kept thinking about that phone call. That stupid phone call. The one I could have answered. The one I convinced myself could wait until morning. After the funeral, I went home. I didn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I looked at my phone. Brad's last text was still there. Call me. It's important. I deleted it. I don't know why. Maybe I thought getting rid of the message would make the guilt disappear. It didn't. 6 months passed. I started rebuilding my life. Or at least pretending I had. Then one Tuesday night, my phone rang. I was watching television when I heard it. I looked down. My stomach dropped. Brad. His name was on my screen. I nearly dropped the phone. I didn't answer. The call stopped. Then it rang again. I stared at it. My hands were shaking. I answered, hello. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then I heard breathing, slow, uneven. Brad. A voice came through the speaker, Sam. I couldn't breathe. It was him. There was no mistaking it. The same voice. The same way he said my name. I stood up so quickly that my chair fell backward. Where are you? Silence. Then Brad said, you need to find out who was in the truck with me. The call ended. I stood there for almost a minute. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I was terrified. I convinced myself someone had hacked his phone. But then I looked at the call log. The number was Brad's old number. The same number that had been disconnected after his death. I called it back. It didn't work. The next morning, I called the police. I told them what happened. They didn't believe me. I didn't blame them. Then I asked about the accident. The detective pulled up the report. Brad had been alone. There was no passenger. No witnesses. No evidence of another vehicle. I asked if they had checked his phone. The detective said it had been recovered from the wreckage. Most of it was destroyed. But they had managed to recover some call records. I asked him who Brad had called before the accident. He looked at the screen. Then looked at me. There were 3 calls to your number. I already knew that. Then he said there was one more. He gave me the number. I recognized it. Richard Voss. Dad's old business partner. I hadn't heard that name in years. Richard had been involved in the family business. After Dad died, he bought the property my father had left us. The same property Brad had wanted. I suddenly remembered something. Brad had called me about Richard once. He told me he didn't trust him. I told him he was being paranoid. The detective asked me why I knew Richard. I told him everything. The detective became quiet. Then he said, there's something you should know. He pulled out another file. A few days before the accident, Brad had contacted the police. He told them he believed someone had been following him. But he'd refused to give them a name. He had also asked about reopening an old financial investigation involving my father. I stared at the report. Brad had been trying to uncover something. And I had ignored him. That afternoon, I went to the old family property. Richard had purchased it after Brad refused to sell. The house had been empty for years. I still had a key. When I walked inside, everything came rushing back. The smell, the floors, the old staircase where Brad and I used to race each other. I went into Dad's study. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew Brad had been there. I started opening drawers, nothing. Then I noticed something behind the old bookshelf. A loose piece of wood. I pulled it away. There was a small metal box hidden inside the wall. Inside were bank statements, property records, copies of checks, and dozens of handwritten notes, all connected to Richard Voss. I spent hours going through them. Then I found something that made my hands go cold. A letter from Dad. It explained that Richard had been stealing money from the company for years. Dad had discovered it. He planned to report him. But Dad died before he could. Brad must have found the documents. And Richard must have known. I was still reading when I heard something downstairs. A door closing, I froze. Hello. No answer. I grabbed my phone. Then I heard footsteps. Someone was walking slowly across the living room. I ran downstairs. Nobody was there. The front door was open. I called the police. They searched the property but found nothing. That night I received another call, Brad. I answered immediately. His voice sounded different this time, tired. Almost peaceful. Sam. I'm here. I'm sorry. For what? For leaving you with this. I started crying. Brad, I should have answered. He was silent. Then he said, I know. I couldn't speak. He continued. Don't trust the accident report. What do you mean? They didn't find everything. What didn't they find? There was a long silence. Then Brad whispered, look at the driver's side. The call ended. The next morning, I went back to the detective. I told him what Brad had said. He pulled the accident photographs. We looked through them together. There were tire marks along the driver's side of Brad's truck. Marks that didn't belong to Brad's vehicle. The original investigators had assumed they came from another car passing on the highway. But when they compared the measurements, they realized the other vehicle had been extremely close. Someone had forced Brad off the road. The investigation was reopened. 3 weeks later, they arrested Richard Voss. They found evidence linking him to Brad's death. He had followed Brad that night. Brad had threatened to expose him. Richard had tried to force him off the road. He succeeded, but he didn't know Brad had already made copies of the documents. And he certainly didn't know Brad had tried one last time to call me. The detective later told me something strange. Brad's phone had been destroyed in the crash. It couldn't make calls. But the phone records showed something impossible. 6 months after Brad died, his phone had called mine. 3 times. Nobody could explain it. I can. Because I know what I heard. And I know my brother. Sometimes I still hear from him. Not every night. Not even every month. But every once in a while, my phone rings. No number appears, I answer. There's usually silence. Then I hear him, Sam. And every time, I say the same thing. I'm sorry. He never tells me it's okay. Maybe it isn't. Maybe some things don't need forgiveness. Maybe they just need to be understood. The last time he called, I asked him something. I asked him if he was still angry with me. There was a long silence. Then he said, "No." I started crying. "Then why do you keep calling?" His voice became very quiet. "Because you finally answer." That was the last time I heard my brother. And now, I understand something I didn't understand when I was alive. We always think we have more time, tomorrow, next week, next year. We'll make the call. We'll apologize. We'll visit. We'll say the things we should have said. But sometimes tomorrow never comes. My name is Sam Mercer. I was given permission to tell you this story. The Lantern Keeper says every soul has a reason for remaining inside his lantern. I used to think mine was guilt. Now I think I know the truth. I wasn't trapped because I couldn't let go of my brother. I was trapped because I never told him. I was sorry. So if someone you love calls you tonight, answer. Even if you're angry. Even if it's inconvenient. Even if you think you have plenty of time. Because one day, the phone may ring, and you may give anything in the world for it to be your brother on the other end. And if you're lucky, you'll get the chance to answer while they are still alive.
Welcome back to Half Past Horror. I am the Lantern Keeper. Within this lantern dwell the souls of those whose stories were never meant to be told. Tonight, I shall share one with you. But be warned, some stories refuse to stay buried.
The desert stretched endlessly beyond the windshield, shimmering beneath the Mexican sun. 6 friends laughed inside 2 subs as they crossed the border for a week-long road trip down Baja. Music blasted. Coolers rattled. Someone passed around homemade tamales wrapped in foil. Emma hadn't wanted to come. She was fresh off a breakup, tired of pretending she was okay. Then she met Adrian. He wasn't part of her friend group. He'd been invited by someone else's cousin at the last minute, tall. Dark hair, a crooked smile that looked permanently guilty. The kind of man who barely spoke, but somehow everyone listened when he did. Their eyes met during the first fuel stop. Neither looked away. By the second night, they found themselves wandering the beach while everyone else drank around a bonfire. The Pacific crashed against black volcanic rock. Moonlight painted silver across the waves. "I've never believed in soulmates," Emma admitted. Adrian smiled. "Neither do I." "What do you believe?" He looked toward the ocean. "That some people have met before." She laughed. "In another life, no." His voice became strangely quiet. "In another death." The joke landed oddly. She forced a smile. He did not. Over the next 4 days, the attraction became impossible to ignore. Long glances, hands brushing, lingering conversations while everyone else slept. He never tried to kiss her, never flirted too hard. It was almost as if he was afraid. Emma found herself wanting him even more because of it. On the 5th night, they reached an abandoned coastal hotel everyone said had been closed since the 70s. Locals refused to go near it. A bartender muttered one sentence before they left. "People who fall in love, they never leave together." Everyone laughed. Except Adrian. He looked pale. The group dared each other inside. Broken chandeliers swung overhead. Dust covered everything. The air smelled like salt. And something rotten. Emma wandered away from everyone. She found room 19. Inside sat an old photograph. A young couple. The woman looked exactly like her. Same freckles, same eyes, same smile. Standing beside her was Adrian. Not similar, not someone who resembled him, Adrian. Wearing clothes from the 1950s. Emma dropped the photograph. Footsteps appeared behind her. I told you not to come here. His voice trembled. She turned. What is this? He didn't answer. Instead, he whispered, I'm sorry I found you again. The hotel lights suddenly flickered. Every door slammed shut. The hallway filled with whispers. Hundreds of them, all saying the same sentence. You promised. The walls began bleeding seawater. Their friends screamed somewhere downstairs. Glass shattered. The building groaned like it was breathing. Emma grabbed Adrian's hand. It was freezing. Impossible. Like touching marble left in snow. She looked into his eyes. They are cold. He closed them. I've been dead for 73 years. Silence then. He opened his jacket. There was no heartbeat. No breaths. No warmth. Only a massive rusted hook embedded through his chest. I drowned here. Emma stumbled backward. No. I've crossed every lifetime trying to stop you from coming back. What are you talking about? His expression shattered. Because every time we meet, you die. A scream erupted downstairs. One of their friends came running into the hallway, covered in seawater, eyes completely black. Then another, and another. Each of them whispered with someone else's voice. You left us. You escaped. You owe us. The hotel wasn't haunted. It was waiting for Emma. Adrian grabbed her hand. We have to leave before sunrise. What happens if we don't? He stared toward the endless dark hallway. They remember who you really are. Emma's head began pounding. Flashes exploded inside her mind. Another lifetime. Another storm. Another sinking ship. Another promise she had broken. Then one horrifying realization. She hadn't met Adrian on this trip. She had met him. Every lifetime. For hundreds of years. And every time. She was the reason he died. As they burst through the hotel doors, dawn finally broke over the ocean. The whispers stopped. The hotel fell silent. The others emerged one by one, confused, alive. With no memory of the night. Emma turned to Adrian. He smiled for the first time. I bought you one more lifetime. What does that mean? He stepped backward. His body slowly dissolved into sea mist. I'll find you again. Then he vanished, leaving only the old photograph in the sand, except the picture had changed. This time, Emma was standing alone, and behind her, barely visible in the hotel's third-floor window, stood dozens of identical versions of Adrian, all staring directly at the camera. To be continued, every lifetime has a debt. Emma has only begun to remember hers.
Remember, horror isn't waiting under your bed. It's waiting for you to press play. If you enjoyed tonight's story, subscribe to Half Past Horror, because the next nightmare is already waiting. Until then, sleep well while you still can.
The night holds secrets, desires you should never have, and temptations you may not survive. Welcome to Midnight Temptations.
I used to believe that when someone died, they were simply gone. No matter how much you loved them. No matter how desperately you begged them to stay. No matter how many nights you whispered their name into an empty room. Dead was dead. I believed that for 3 years. Then I met Daniel. And for the first time since my husband's funeral, I wondered if I might still have a heart capable of loving someone else. My husband's name was Michael. He had been my world. For 12 years, I had fallen asleep beside him, woken beside him, laughed with him, argued with him, made plans with him. Then one rainy evening, he left for work and never came home. The phone call came at 11:43 that night. I remember the exact time because I stared at the clock while the police officer stood in my doorway. 3 years later, I still couldn't look at 11:43 without feeling like someone had reached inside my chest and squeezed my heart. After Michael died, I stopped living. I went through the motions. I went to work. I bought groceries. I answered people's questions. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. But I never really came back to myself. Then Daniel walked into my life. It happened at a little coffee shop near my apartment. He accidentally knocked my book onto the floor. He picked it up, apologized, and noticed the title. "You like horror?" I laughed. "Apparently." He smiled. "Apparently. It's complicated." He sat across from me. We talked for almost 2 hours. When I finally walked home that afternoon, I realized something that frightened me. I had smiled. A real smile. For the first time in years. Daniel didn't try to replace Michael. That was what made me trust him. He understood that there was a part of me that would always belong to the man I had lost. He never asked me to forget. He simply asked me to let him be part of whatever life I had left. Slowly, I did. Months passed. Daniel and I became inseparable. He made me laugh. He held me when memories of Michael became too painful. And eventually, I began to believe that perhaps loving again wasn't betrayal. Perhaps Michael would have wanted me to be happy. Then something strange happened. The first time I noticed it, Daniel and I were lying together in bed. The room was dark. Rain tapped against the window. Daniel pulled me close. And for just a moment, I felt another hand brush gently against my shoulder. I froze. Daniel noticed. "What's wrong?" I couldn't answer. Because I knew that touch. I had known it for 12 years. It was Michael's. I told myself it was grief. Nothing more. Grief can make you imagine things. At least that's what I told myself. But it happened again. And again. Sometimes it was a familiar touch. Sometimes it was the faintest whisper near my ear. Once, while Daniel was asleep beside me, I felt someone kiss my lips. I opened my eyes. No one was there. I sat upright in bed, staring into the darkness. "Michael." Daniel continued sleeping. I laughed nervously. I was losing my mind. That had to be it. But the strange moments continued. And slowly, I stopped being afraid of them. I started waiting for them. Because whenever that familiar presence appeared, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night Michael died. I felt safe, loved, known. Sometimes, I would close my eyes and imagine that Michael was beside me again. I knew it wasn't real. At least, that's what I told myself. Then one night, something changed. Daniel and I were together in our bedroom. The lights were low. The rain was falling outside. Daniel pulled me close. And suddenly, the air in the room became cold. Not cool, cold, freezing. The kind of cold that seems to come from somewhere much deeper than the weather. Daniel stopped. "Did you feel that?" I looked at him. Before I could answer, his expression changed. His eyes became distant. His breathing slowed. Then he looked directly at me. And when he spoke, his voice wasn't Daniel's. It was Michael's, Elena. My entire body went still. I couldn't breathe. I stared at him. "Michael." His eyes filled with tears. "Yes, baby." I screamed. Not because I was afraid. Because I had waited 3 years to hear those words. I reached for him. "Is it really you?" He nodded. "It's me." I touched his face. Daniel's face. But somehow, I knew the man looking back at me was Michael. My husband. The love of my life. The man I had buried. How? He smiled sadly. I tried to come back. "Why?" "Because you wouldn't let me go." I began crying. "I missed you. I know. I needed you. I know." He pulled me close. We made love for hours, until time no longer existed. He touched me in ways I didn't know I needed. His mouth hungry for every part of me. And for the first time in 3 years, the emptiness inside me disappeared. I didn't care how impossible it was. I didn't care how it could happen. I only cared that he was there. That night, I stopped asking questions. I simply held on to him. And when I finally whispered, "Don't leave me again," he answered, "I won't." After that night, Michael began appearing more often. Sometimes, Daniel would disappear for minutes at a time. Sometimes hours. And when he returned, he wouldn't remember anything. But I remembered. I remembered everything. One evening, Michael appeared again. He looked at me with those familiar eyes. "Do you want me to stay?" My heart broke. "Please." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "You understand what that means?" "I don't care." He came closer. "Then say it." I held his face in my hands. "Stay with me, Michael." The lights flickered. The room became ice cold. And Daniel screamed. I watched as his body collapsed against the bed. For several seconds, everything was silent. Then he lifted his head. And Michael looked back at me. He smiled. "I'm home." From that moment forward, Daniel was gone. Or at least the part of him I had known was gone. Michael had completely taken over. He cooked the way Michael used to cook. He hummed the songs Michael used to sing. He remembered things Daniel could never have known. The secret nickname Michael gave me when we first met. The scar on my knee from when I fell off my bicycle at 17. The first movie we watched together. The promise he made to me on our wedding night. Everything. I had my husband back. And I was happy. At least I thought I was. People started asking questions. My sister came to visit. She stared at him strangely. "Who are you?" Michael smiled. "You know who I am." She looked at me. Then back at him. "Elena." "Daniel is dead." I laughed. "No. He's right there." My sister started crying. She called someone. I became angry. I told her to leave. But she wouldn't. Then men came, doctors. They tried to take me away. I fought them. I screamed. I told them they were trying to steal my husband again. Michael held me while they restrained me. "It's okay, baby. Don't let them take me." "I won't." Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was in a white room. There were no candles, no rain. No Michael. Just white walls. A locked door. And a woman sitting beside my bed. She called herself a doctor. She told me my name was Elena. She told me I had been hospitalized for 3 years. 3 years. I laughed. That can't be right. She showed me photographs. I saw myself sitting in the same room, older, thinner, hollow-eyed. She told me that after Michael died, my depression became severe. She told me I had created an entire world inside my mind. Daniel wasn't real. Michael wasn't inside Daniel. Daniel had never existed. I refused to believe her. Then she showed me the photograph. Michael's funeral. My funeral clothes, the date. 3 years earlier. I stared at the picture, and for one brief second, I remembered. The accident, the phone call, the funeral, the unbearable silence afterward, the years of grief, the hospital. Everything came rushing back. I looked around the room, and I understood. I had built a world where Michael came back. A world where I wasn't alone. A world where I could love him forever. Then I heard something behind me. Elena. I turned. Michael was standing in the doorway. He smiled. My husband. My beautiful husband. The doctor said there was no one there. But I could see him. He held out his hand. Come home, baby. I smiled. And just like that, the hospital disappeared. The white walls became our bedroom. The fluorescent lights became candles. The doctor became a stranger, standing outside our world. Michael walked toward me. I reached for him. You came back. I told you I would. He kissed my forehead, and I closed my eyes. Because somewhere deep inside my broken mind, I knew the truth. But I didn't want the truth. I wanted Michael. So I chose him. Every single time. And sometimes, when the doctors managed to bring me back for a few seconds, I remember. I remember that my husband is dead. I remember Daniel never existed. I remember that I'm in a psychiatric hospital. And I remember that the man holding my hand isn't really there. But then Michael whispers my name. And I forget again. Because grief can build beautiful prisons. And sometimes, the most terrifying prison is the one you never want to leave. My name is Elena. And tonight, my husband is waiting for me. So please, don't wake me.
The night is over, but temptation never sleeps. Until next time, my loves, good night.
Welcome back to Half Past Horror. I am the Lantern Keeper. Within this lantern dwell the souls of those whose stories were never meant to be told. Tonight, I shall share one with you. But be warned, some stories refuse to stay buried.
The first
Welcome
person
back
disappeared at exactly 11:47 p.m. No screams. No gunshots. No warning, just gone. By sunrise, the sheriff found nothing except a perfectly clean front porch, a rocking chair still moving, and deep claw marks burned into the wood. Everyone in the tiny town of Black Hollow assumed it was an animal. They were wronged. The next night, the power died. Every phone lost service. The roads out of town became swallowed by an impossible fog that stretched for miles. Then they arrived. No one saw them come from the sky. No spaceships. No explosions. Only towering figures walking silently through the darkness. They stood nearly 9 feet tall. Their bodies were pale and stretched like skin pulled over branches. Their heads were smooth and eyeless. But where mouths should have been, there was a ring of razor-sharp teeth that slowly opened like a flower. They didn't hunt with sight. They hunted with sound. A barking dog vanished first. A crying baby. Seconds later, silence. Anyone who made a noise louder than a whisper was torn apart before they could finish their scream. The creatures moved faster than anything human. 1 second, they were 50 yards away. The next, they were fighting. By morning, the creatures disappeared. As suddenly as they'd come. The town counted its dead. 36 people were gone. The remaining residents gathered inside the church. No one spoke above a whisper. The sheriff wrote one sentence on a chalkboard. Stay silent after dark. No one argued. Night 2. The town prepared. Windows covered. Generators turned off. Babies sedated with medicine. Families hid in basements. Everyone prayed then. A teenager accidentally dropped a flashlight onto a wooden floor. Clack. The sound echoed through the house. Outside, every creature froze. Dozens of heads slowly turned toward the noise. Then they ran. The family barely had time to hold the boys' mouths shut before the walls exploded inward. Neighbors listened helplessly from across the street. No one moved. No one dared cry. The feeding lasted less than 15 seconds. Then silence returned. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button and subscribe to Half Past Horror. Every subscription helps this channel reach more horror fans, and you won't want to miss what's waiting in the next story. Especially if this one keeps you awake tonight. Morning came. Only 17 people remained alive. Among them were widowed mechanic Daniel Harper and his 16-year-old daughter, Emily. Daniel had figured something out. The creatures weren't just reacting to sound. They remembered where it came from. If you stayed absolutely still afterward, sometimes they'd leave. Sometimes. The final night arrived. No one believed they'd survive. The fog rolled in thicker than ever. The stars disappeared. At exactly 11:47, the creatures returned. Only this time, there were hundreds. They surrounded every house, waiting, listening. Hours passed. No sounds. No movement then. Church bells began ringing, loud, violent. Over and over. The entire town froze. Who was ringing them? The creatures sprinted toward the church in one enormous wave. Daniel grabbed Emily's hand. Now they ran. Silently across backyards. Toward Daniel's pickup truck. He had removed every squeaky hinge. Wrapped the tools in cloth. Even pushed the truck downhill before starting it. The engine caught without a roar. They drove straight into the fog. Behind them, the church suddenly went silent. Then, the creatures turned. Every one of them. Toward the truck. Daniel floored the accelerator. The creatures chased them on all fours. Keeping pace. Emily stared into the side mirror. Dad. He looked. The church wasn't behind them anymore. Neither were the houses. Only endless trees. They had been driving for 20 minutes. But they hadn't left town. The road had become a circle. One by one, the headlights died. The truck rolled to a stop. The creatures surrounded them. Neither Daniel nor Emily dared breathe. One alien stepped forward. It leaned its head against the windshield. Listening. Minutes passed, nothing then. A tiny vibration. Daniel's phone. He had forgotten to turn it off. The screen lit up. Emergency alert, a soft buzz. The windshield shattered. Blackness. The next morning, military helicopters filled the sky. Soldiers in sealed suits entered Black Hollow. They found overturned cars, empty homes, fresh meals still sitting on kitchen tables. No bodies, no blood, no survivors. The town was declared abandoned. Official reports blamed a chemical lake. The public never questioned it. 6 months later, a father and teenage girl walked out of the national forest nearly 40 miles away, barefoot, starving, unable to explain how they survived. Daniel Harper, Emily Harper, the only known survivors of Black Hollow. News stations called it a miracle. Scientists called it impossible. Neither of them would speak about the third night. Whenever reporters asked, Daniel simply whispered, "They are still listening." Emily hadn't spoken a single word since they were rescued, not once. Doctors assumed trauma had taken her voice. Until one evening, Daniel woke to hear something outside his bedroom. A soft clicking, like fingernails tapping glass. He followed it into the hallway. Emily stood facing the front door, completely still. Her lips slowly curled into a smile. Without turning around, she spoke for the first time in 6 months, in a voice that wasn't hers. "They found us." 3 deafening knocks echoed through the house. Then came another, and another. Outside, hundreds of shadows stood perfectly still beneath the streetlights, waiting for someone to make a sound. The end, or as IT